All right. Welcome back. We're a little behind in the creating the assignments. Hopefully, we'll be done early this week, maybe today or tomorrow. Just hold on. And later this week, we have the project proof of concept. Although it's not required that you are using Angular or the controllers and the services, I would encourage you that you work as much as you can towards that goal. You have a little more than a month to complete the project, so hopefully, what I'm asking for, you might already be well ahead of what I'm already asking you for in the project assignments. Okay, they are somewhat of a milestone, right? Asking you that you should already have something to be able to show me. The requirements can change, right? It might be that you might have tried out your API, web API, and you might be finding some challenges, right? That it's not providing the data you were expecting, or it's not formatted the way you were. If you are making changes, please run it by me, run it by the TAs, and we can negotiate. Right? If it becomes way too easy, then we can think of something else. If it becomes way too hard, again, we can also think of something else. Right? Just run it by me. Let's see. So we should finish today the example that we were working on last week about being able to search data through an API and also being able to store some of that data on the server. Also navigate between pages, passing. For instance, you might have a search page, right, that shows some results that are a summary of those results, right? But then you want to be able to navigate to somewhat of a details page, right? That maybe I want to see the details of this movie that I like, or I'm about to like, or comment on. So how do you store that, or what do you keep in the system or not? What I typically tell everyone that you should keep very, very little of any of that data around in your database, right? If someone else is already storing and hosting data for you, right? If somebody else in your own database, right? Somebody else is maintaining it. You just need to know how to retrieve that data on demand, right? And you should store enough of that piece of data to be able to go back and ask for it, right? So for instance, in the movie example, the only thing we really have to maintain in our own database, right, is the ID of a particular movie, right? The ID IMDb that we were looking at last on Thursday, yes? That's the only real thing that I need to maintain. If I ever want to retrieve the details about that movie, I can always go back to IMDb and say, hey, give details for this particular movie with this ID, right? I might want to keep a couple of things replicated in my own database, right? For instance, I might want to replicate the name of the movie, right? Maybe the rating of the movie, maybe a thumbnail picture, those kinds of things. I might replicate, duplicate in my own database, just because if I have liked a lot of movies or commented on a lot of movies, right, or bookmarked them, I don't want to have to go and query IMDb, right, 20 times or 30 times, right, and separate queries for each one of them just to retrieve just to display the name and the thumbnail, right? That maybe I keep around in my own database. But the details, right, if I want to navigate to a details page, I'll go for the full-blown JSON object back to IMDb to display the details. Does that make sense? Right. So that's what I want to demo, how to do that. Notice that to accomplish this, we're going to need to have two pages talking to each other, right? One of them is the results page, right, that displays 20, 30 films that match search criteria, yes? And then you have a details page that needs to say, oh, I'm showing the details of one particular movie, right? These two pages need to talk to one another, and pass an argument and says, hey, it's this movie whose details I want. Make sense? So we'll see how to do that. Also, if we have time towards the end, we're going to start talking about how to persist this data, right? Up to this point, our applications have been pretty stateless, right? We haven't persisted any data, right? It's been living in the client. The most we've done of persisting any data has been to store it in the server, right? But we want to store it in long-term storage, such as a database, right? So if we have time towards the end, we'll start talking about Mongo, MongoDB, and Mongoose, and how to use that NoSQL database, right? And we'll be talking about it for the next couple of weeks. How to create database applications. So let's see where we were. We were in the lectures. We were talking under this here, right? In the movies, we talked about structure, right? Where our application needs to have a front end, right? That is being consumed by a human being, right? And a human being is interacting with this front end, and also it's interacting with a back end, right? With a data service, right? It's actually talking to three things, right? It's talking to the user through an Angular interface, right? It's talking to the web API, IMDb, right? Through the HTTP service, right? And it's also talking to our own backend, right? So we have an Angular application that's talking to three. The data model, right, to represent users. Today we'll talk about also how to represent movies, right, and relationships between users and movies. And we have to talk about how to make that data available to outsiders, right? Anybody who wants to use that data through services. Okay. Now, who's this service making the data available to? Really, anybody who knows the URL, right, and knows how to send us a URL is actually able to see any of our data, right? Later on, towards right before we go out to Thanksgiving vacation, we'll talk about securing the data, right? Maybe some data we want to make available, and some data not, right? So we'll need to protect those URLs. Should you have to log in, for instance, to access certain types of URLs? We'll talk about. Typically, we think about protecting URLs to a particular user interface, right? Because, well, you can't see somebody else's profile, right? You can't see, a system admin's user interface, right? Unless you're logged in. So that's a classical security measures, right? You protect certain pages, right, from certain people having to log in. But in single pages applications, we have a little additional challenge, right? Not only are we using URLs to retrieve HTML, right, to render user interfaces, we're also using URLs to retrieve data, right? Where we're asking, it says, hey, what are the movies that this person likes? Yes, that's a URL. We pass the ID of a user, and it comes. And who should be able to see that? Well, maybe there's no incriminating data there, right? And maybe we make that publicly available. Just like IMDb does, right? IMDb made all this data available, yes? You provide an ID for a movie or a search title, and it'll give you data, yes? So presumably these URLs are not protected, yes? Anybody can use these URLs, right? They're in public domain. Us too, right? We can make these URLs available, right? If we publish this on OpenShift, yes? Anybody who knows this URL is going to be able to query us, right? About what user likes what movies, yes? But certain URLs we want to protect, right? So for instance, IMDb certainly doesn't make certain URLs available, like being able to delete a movie, right? Or change a movie, right? Or update a movie, right? Certainly those URLs exist. Certainly those URLs exist, but first, they're not available in the public domain, right? Nobody really knows what those URLs are. Presumably, they take posts and deletes, right? And puts just like we do, right? But those URLs typically you'll need to pass some kind of credential and say, hey, I have access. I do have the authority to delete a movie or change a movie, right? Or put a movie or post a movie. We'll see how to deal with that challenge when we talk about Passport and whatnot a little later. Let's come back to where we were on Thursday. Let's see. Let me start the server. Let's see. Are we in the right place? Yes. All right. So we'll say node server, and the application was, let's see, where was that? It was in the movies. And here's the index, right? So it's under public, lectures, movies, client, index.html. All right, so let's go there. And we'll go, what is this? Ask. Huh. Okay, localhost, I think it's 3000. And we had lectures, movies, client, there it is, right? Oops. Wait, did it run? Oh, something went wrong. Wait a minute. It's complaining. Why are you complaining? Blah, 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 blah. Oh, I think I was playing around with Mongo last night. Let me turn this off. And maybe here. Oh, you know what? I think because I don't have MongoDB running. Let me start Mongo. Maybe we'll play around with it at the end of the class. Do sudo MongoD. Let's see if that fixes it. Okay, yeah. Node was complaining that MongoDB wasn't running, right? Okay, so let's try this again. Let's hit the client. There it is, the movie app, right? So let's first see how we can have a page talk to another page, right? About search results, right? So the top level one, you do a query, and Dumb and Dumber. For instance, what we might do is that if I click on the URL on Dumb and Dumber, perhaps I navigate to the details page of Dumb and Dumber, right? We could do that, or we could have a button here, right? Maybe a pencil that allows you to edit the movie. Let's create a URL here. Let's create a URL, and we want to navigate to a details page, right? Remember that I believe we started creating the details page, did we? Yeah, it's this one, right? You click on details. Oh, there it is. It goes to movie details. So what we want to do here is somehow these two pages to talk to one another, right? So that if I click on the URL of a movie, it tells this page, hey, it's this movie they want the details for, right? And notice that's you're gonna need that for the assignment, right? In the assignment, right, there's a list of forms, yes? And when you click on a form, you want to navigate to a list of fields associated to that form, right? So you're gonna need to be able to display, this form has these fields, and that other form has other fields, right? You need to tell me which form you're talking about, right? So I can retrieve the correct fields, right? So let's talk about doing that. And we have a couple of views here. We have two views for the movie. One of them is the search view, which is this one, right? That has the input field, and I can search, and then the summary results down below, right? And what I want to do is make this a URL so that if I click on it, I navigate to the details page. Yes, so that's easy, right? We can here's the link, right? Where is it? Dumb and Dumber. Here it is, right? Here is the text, right? And we want to make here is a URL. I'm going to say href, navigate somewhere. I want to navigate somewhere, right? Typically, if we don't know where to navigate, we put here a hash, yes? And to see if that converts this into a hyperlink. So if we reload, notice that now it's blue, right? I can click on it. The problem here, if I click on it, notice what's going to happen in the URL. Right? Notice that it says hash, right? It just says hash at the and notice that everything went away. What's going on there? Well, remember that hash has a very special meaning in single page applications, right? So you might have run into this quite a few times, in your assignments, right? That when you copy a lot of links from Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap uses hash quite a bit, right? For the placeholder for a URL for href. But hash has this very special meaning in single page applications. It means, notice that all changes, right, happen after the hash, right? If I go to details, notice that it goes to details. Notice it changes after the hash. You see that? We never leave the index page, right? We're always on the same page. So if you want to navigate to details, for instance, what I could do is put it right here, details, right? So if I reload, notice that if I hover over this, it has details at the end. See that? That's the URL. If I click on it, notice that I do navigate to the details page. See that? Right? What I want to do is I like to be able to pass an argument, right? Saying, hey, it's the details for this particular page, right? So what we could do is notice that we already have the data, right? Notice that in the movie title, these are the movie titles for the real movies, right? These are the movie titles for the real movies. So what the same thing we did here, right? The same thing we did here. We're going to do for the real titles, right, of the real movies. Right, so if we search for Avatar, right, this will be Avatar, right? If I click on it, it'll go to the details page. Yes, right. Right. Notice that if I search Avatar, right, it'll come back eventually at some point. Now would be a good time. There we go. Oh, what happened? Maybe I didn't reload my page. Let me try that again. 7. There they are. They're hyperlinks, right? They're hyperlinks. If I click on any one of them, right, it goes to the details page, right? But what we want to be able to do is pass our argument and say it's the details for this particular page. So what we could do is add that at the end of the URL, right? That would be a nice. For instance, if the IMDb is 123 QWE, that's what we would want there, right? What about over here for the real movies, right? We want as part of the URL, we want the ID IMDb, right? Where do we have that? Well, we do have it here, isn't it? There it is, right? That's movie.idmdb, right? Isn't that it? All right, we can copy that because notice that this isn't a repeat, right? This is repeating over all the movies, right? For each movie, it's creating hyperlinks for each one of them. See that? Right? And as it's iterating, I'm displaying the movie. And I can also display the movie IDMDB. And I want it right here. Okay, that's where I want it. But that's not going to quite work. What's it missing? Sorry? What?
Curly braces.
The curly braces, right? Notice that over here, notice that if we want to just display data, right, we need the curly braces. If it's outside of any ng attribute, like this one, notice this, here's movie IMDb. Why are we not using curly brackets here? Right, because it's an Angular attribute, right? And Angular understands how to parse this, yes? Knows how to parse this. But here, I'm using it inside of plain text, yes? It's not inside of an Angular context, right? So it doesn't know, right? So we do have to put curly brackets here. Okay, so let's try this. Let's go back and search again, right? And we search for Terminator, and right, notice that if I hover over them, notice that the IMDb is at the end. See that? Right? And it changes for each one of them. Right? If we click on it, now notice that if I click on these, it does not actually navigate to details. Why is that? What happened? Right? Notice that the details, right? The router is expecting what? Just details, right? it doesn't know details slash something. It doesn't know what to do with that other something, right? And we know, right? This is the, if you don't know, then go to search, right? Because it knows details. It doesn't know details slash something, right? So what we could do is say, oh, well, if you have details slash something, then go to details. Would it make sense to ever go to the details without something? It makes no sense, right? You navigate to a details page without telling me the details of what, right? So it makes sense to hard code this in here. So what's it called? ID IMDb, right? So we're going to put a placeholder saying here, and notice that we put a colon here saying that this is not hard coded, right? The details is hard coded. That's a literal string, and then I say a placeholder, right? It says it could be anything, followed by anything. If it's followed by anything, I want you to go to the details view. Okay. All right. So if we go back and now refresh this, right, and I click on Dumb and Dumber, I do go to the details page. I am now in the details page, and I have, as part of the URL, I have the ID IMDb, right? Get at it. I need to get at that URL at the end, right? So that once I have the ID, I now can go back to IMDb and say, hey, I want the details of this particular movie, right? Actually, what is the IMDb of Dumb and Dumber? Okay. Okay, it looks like it's TT0 something, right? Let me copy that. We copy the ID, and I'm just going to hard code it here in my example, my Dumb and Dumber. Instead of using model that, I'm going to hard code it here, right here. There we go. Okay, so that now when I do search and I do a Dumb and Dumber, I do have the actual IDMDB of Dumb and Dumber. All right. Okay. Now that we have that, this page needs to grab that, right, and do the call to IMDb about that information. Let's see what it could do. The way we're going to do that is that in the details controller, notice that it's not doing anything now, right? It's not doing any much. All right. What we're going to do is we want to grab that from the parameter, right? It's a parameter in the path. And who put it there? Who put it there? Route provider put it there, right? Route provider is looking at that URL, right? And it says if that URL has that pattern, right? Navigate to details page. Yes. So the router put that URL knows about this URL and it passes it to you. And what it does, the provider parses this out of the URL and makes it available in a variable called whatever name you gave it, IDMDB, right? It puts it in there, right? And it provides it to you, to the controller, this controller, and it provides it to you inside of a variable called route params. And has all those parameters that are parsed out from the URL. Right. So, for instance, if you want the ID of the movie, you can parse it out of the route params and whatever name you gave it. What name did we give it? IDMDB. I'll copy that, and there it is. Right. And we can do console. We'll just print it out. Log ID. Okay. Let's view the console. Right, in the console here, and if I reload, notice that the console displays the ID, right? So now I have the ID in the controller. Right? The controller has that ID. What can I do with that ID? I can go back to IMDb with that ID, right, and retrieve the results for that particular movie, right? I don't remember what the URL is, so let's go back to IMDb for that. This is my API films. And I believe one of the URLs allows you to pass the ID of the movie. Search by parameters, search by ID. There it is. It's this one, example IDMDB, right? So if I provide that ID, right? If I copy that and I come here and I paste that IMDB, I want it to be a JSON P, and I search. That's the URL, right? And it comes back with Dumb and Dumber. The continuing nutty adventures of Lloyd and Harry and their pet beaver, blah, 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 right? So yeah, so that's the URL. I'm gonna copy that URL, right, and go back. What I wanna do is that with that IMDb, I wanna get that information, right? How do I do that? I need to do an HTTP call back to IDMDB, right? It says HTTP dot, I wanna do a get, and that's the URL. That's the URL. And on success, right, I want to do something, right? It's going to give me back a response, which hopefully it will be this JSON object. Yes? And then I can render it locally and do whatever I want with it. Yes? If I have a whole bunch of posters, maybe I'll do, a carousel or something. Yes? If I have actors and directors and whatever, I'll display them also here. But it's not a get, right? What is it? JSON P, right? And if it's JSON P, we need to add something else, right? Callback, right? So I'll put a callback here, callback. And it's JSON underscore callback, I believe. And in the response, I'm just going to display it to the console for now. Okay. So let's see if it works. Let's go back to our page and let's leave the console open and let's do a refresh of that page. And something happened. Oh, HTTP, the service, right? We didn't ask for the service. We'll ask for the service here in the controller, right? Try it again. There we have an object. We have a JSON object that comes back saying writers, no writers. Really? Have a poster. Let's see. Let's see if this is a poster. Dumb and Dumber. Really? That's the poster? Oh, it's an animated series. Really? They made an animated series? Are you serious? Okay. All right. Whatever. Okay. But we really don't want. We want this to be an attribute that we can pass around. Really, it's the ID that we're getting from the URL, right? So this would be a like this, right? The ID, and then we would get that particular one, right? Let's see if we go back, right, and we go to movie details, and we search for Star Wars. And The Force Awakens. Oh, let's show the console. Force Awakens. If I go there, notice that hopefully there it is. That's the JSON object for The Force Awakens. The continuing, wait, nutty adventures. What did I click on? Did I hard code it? Did I hard code it? Wait, Star Wars. Search. Episode, let me see, this is Awakens. They're different, right? And I click on it. And the URL is the URL for what? Oh, it's the wrong IMDb. What am I doing? Did I not refresh this page? Oh, you know what? I didn't refresh this page. I didn't refresh. Notice what happened, right? I modified the page, but it never gets reloaded, right? Unless you reload the entire thing. It's a single page application. What it does is that it loads the page once, right? And then it never reloads it again unless you need to reload the entire application. Okay. Anyway, once I have the data here, I can send it to the user interface through the scope, right? I can say here's scope. I can send it to the user interface for rendering. I can say scope. I say dot movie, right? Equal response. And then in the details page, I can render it. I can say, well, at least I can say here's the movie object. Here's a movie object, right? Let's try it again. There it is, right? That's a JSON object. For what object is this? Original plan, continuation of the saga created by and set 30 years after 1983, rated blah, blah, blah. I'm guessing J.J. Abrams, right? The Force Awakens, right? Starting this December. Right, so we get the object, right? We can, now that we have the object, is rendering is trivial, right? We can do the image. Here's the image, right? We can get it from the URL poster, so we can render that very easily. We can say img. We can say source equal movie dot, what's it called? URL poster, right? URL poster. All right, so let's render that. Let's see. Did I miss something? Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay. What else do we want to display here? Maybe H1, right? And the movie name, the real name is title, right? So we can say movie.title, right? So let's reload that. Did I miss something? There it is, right? So we have the title, we have the poster. Directors, there's only one, but notice it's an array, right? So if it's an array, I could iterate. Directors, we have a simple plot, and we have a plot. I don't know the difference, but certainly we can put that in maybe in a paragraph, right? P, and say here movie dot simple paragraph. Simple what? Oh, duh. Sorry. Simple plot. Sorry. Simple plot. Right. And I guess we could get rid of the movie here. Or maybe we'll put it. Oh, there it is. So we have the simple plot, and this could be for any movie, right? I can go back and I can search for Avatar. And I go to Avatar 2, 3. Really? Okay, so Avatar. This is the. I'm guessing this is the original one, right? Right. Here's the simple plot. And again, you can render any which way. But notice that my point is that I don't need to store. Right. I only need the IMDb. Right. That's what I like to store in the database to search it for later purposes. Right. And I can be as detailed as I want later in the details page, right? And I believe I've talked to most of you about your projects. That it's it's required that you have some kind of search facility, right? That allows you to retrieve a summary of some kind, yes. And that when you click on any one of these, you navigate to some kind of details page. Whatever your domain is, right? Whether it's food or songs or sports team or whatever it is, right? You should have some kind of search facility. And when you click on any one of them, you go to a details page. And that the only thing you're storing in the database is the ID IMDb or some ID that represents, uniquely identifies your particular domain object. Make sense? All right. Does this make sense? Okay. All right. Anyway, so let's go back to being able to either comment on this movie or say that this is one of my favorite movies, or I want to be able to store and remember these things on the server. Yes. Let's go back to that. Right. For that, we have to go back to the server. We have to tell the server, hey, this person likes this movie or whatever, or comments on that movie. We need to send that data and remember it in the server. Right. I wanted to point out something. So definitely I don't want you to have to store any of this data on the server. The ID is should be enough, and that you should be able to store at least maybe the title and the image, right? Just for the summary purposes. Okay. Anyway, so let's see how we can send data back to the server. Okay. Oh yes, I remember. Most of you have talked to that one of the requirements, right, general requirements for projects is that you should not have to log in to use the application, right? Well, I'm sorry. You should only force a login private data, somebody's personal information, right? But most of it should be available to anybody, right? For instance, I shouldn't have to log in to search, right, and look at the details of a movie. You should not force me to log in to use things that are otherwise public information. Okay, only when I definitely need to know who you are, right? Then you would force me to log in, right? For instance, if I say I like this movie, well, there's no way that I can remember that unless I know who you are, right? Because I need to create a relationship between you and the movie, right? So I know who the movie is, but I don't know who you are, right? So then you should force me to log in. If I need to comment, right? Also, for instance, if I have summary of comments here of other people, reviewing the movie or whatever, right? I should be able to read all those reviews without having to log in. But if I want to create my own review, then I would have to be forced to log in, right? Because again, there would be I'm creating a relationship between you and the movie. I need to know who you are, right? If I'm looking at other users, other people's reviews that they've written, right? Typically, I would put review person who wrote it, right? Review person who wrote it. Review person who wrote it. Maybe a link, maybe a username, right, to whoever wrote that review. Yes. If I click on that user's username, typically that would navigate me to their profile page. Yes. Now it's up to you whether you would make that available to anybody, right? Maybe it's not appropriate that I can just navigate to somebody's profile. Okay. Maybe you should have a public version of somebody's profile and a private version of somebody's profile. Yes, right. And if I click on that user's username, I should maybe see their public profile, right? Maybe who they are, but I can't see their email. I can't see their phone number, right? Maybe I don't know if I maybe show any public information I should be able to see, right? But if I want to follow that user, right, or maybe I want to send a message to that user, then I would force you to log in, right? Because I need to, again, right? For that, I'll leave up to you. What is it that you want to make public or not, and how you're going to deal with that. But ideally, you would make most of the application available to anybody. Okay, and only when you need specific information about someone, force me to log in. All right, so let's see. So for instance, what I like to be able to do, right, is say that I like this movie. So for instance, if I click here, I like to be able to go to a server and say that I like this movie, right? Click on this. I don't know if we had started working on this. If I click on it, notice, oh yeah, we did, right? We started working on it. So if I click on it, notice that down below, see what's happening? Right, a URL is being sent. Right, I guess we had started working on this on Thursday. The client is sending a post, see that? To this local URL, meaning it's hitting our server. It's not going to IDMDB, right? It's hitting our server to this URL, API, lectures, movie, likes, and then the ID IMDb. Okay, right? Right now, this is Dumb and Dumber. And apparently we didn't get to work on this on Thursday. So let's work on that. Okay, notice that there is the server doesn't respond, right? Okay, so where is that? Well, for that development, we're going to work on the server side, right? Let's work on the server side. That's the client. Let's work on the server. The server, right? Here's where everything starts. Here's where everything starts, right? And right, so this is our server, our top that connects to everything and gets a hold of the application from Express, right? And then it calls us right here, right? Calling our server app, passing the app as an argument. Yes, right? So this is where everything starts. So let's close the view. Let's close the controller. Let's go to the details. Let's close the config and the form. Okay, there it is. Here's where everything started. What's it doing? All right, it's instantiating a service, right? It's this one right here, movie service. It's instantiating it and passing it as argument app, right? It's passing it as argument. There it is, right? So app, there it is. It's creating an instance, services, and then movie services. It's this one, movie services. And it's passing as argument app. There we go. And what does it do with that app? It says, I am going to listen for this particular URL as a post. Okay. So we did start working on this. What's going on? App.post. I'm listening to the URL. And then comma likes. Right. So when this URL comes in, it passes the likes. Oh, probably this. Probably this is what's failing. Probably that's what's failing. Let's try it again. Let's restart the server. Okay, and let's go to the UI. Okay, let's clear this. Right, when I click on like, okay, it's not failing. Yeah, I think that's where we left off on Thursday. We were about to get started on the model, right? That's where we. Okay, good. All right, so notice that we have no errors anymore, right? If we click on this, notice that it goes out, right? There it is, right? So it's going out. Notice it's not red, and notice that the server is responding here, right? To the console, it's writing, right? That it is getting the ID of the movie that we like. Okay, so it is getting it. So we need to store it somewhere. Let's store it. So I got the like. Explain this, and where we're going to store it is in the model. Now the model right now is just going to be in RAM. That's going to be in the server RAM. It's going to store it in a local array. Okay. Next week, well, actually maybe today at the end of the class, we're going to start storing this in a database, right? In a real database. We're going to persist it. So we need a model. So here's the model, and the model is implemented in a separate models directory that doesn't exist yet. So let's load that. Let's load it. We're gonna put it on the models, right? So we need to go up a directory, and then down, go into movie.model.js. Okay, it's gonna load the model. And it's going to create an instance, right? And in that instance, I'm going to say model likes, and we're going to pass the IMDb. Okay. All right, so let's create that model in models. Say new, JavaScript, and we called it movie.model.js. Okay, what is this model? Okay. From database courses, typically what happens is that you create a data model, right? And what you want to do is create some kind of interface, right, that allows you to manipulate this model, right? And then convert them into low-level SQL statements or low-level database interactions, right? But you want to provide a high-level interface, right? That hides all the details, right? That hides all the details on how it actually is being stored, right? How it's actually being persisted, right? Because the persistence could change, right? CSV file, right? Or just plain text, or decide that you're going to go to some network connection and store this, right? Or or actually go and store it in MySQL, or want to use a NoSQL database like MongoDB, right? The physical storage, right, should be irrelevant, right? You should provide a high-level API that allows you to talk to whatever physical system is at a very high level. So, for instance, right, we wanted to provide an interface such as this. We want to say, let's create a module.export. So the API might look like something like, I want to be able to like a movie, right? And then implement it here. I like to be able to maybe rate a movie, right? Maybe I want to dislike a movie. Right, so it would be the opposite of likes, I guess. Maybe I want to comment on a movie. These are all be translated into actual updates and inserts and deletes and whatever, right? Into whatever physical storage media you choose, right? And then we return the API, return the API immediately, and provide implementations for all these, right? Function likes, right? Function rate, function dislike, function comment. Okay, so this interface, right, that abstracts, right, the whatever physically actually happens down below, right? So let's implement a couple of these. Well, actually, let's only do likes for now. So which would be this one, right? Model.likes. It's this one right here, right? It's likes with maps to this one. It passes as argument what? The IDMDB. Let's copy that. That's going to receive as an argument. And this will actually store the information in here, right? So we need, where is it going to store it? Well, right now we're going to store it in a, in a array, right, of movies. Right? Eventually, this will go to a collection in the database. But it doesn't matter, right? Our API hides those details from us, right? And today or tomorrow, when we start using actual IMDb, I'm sorry, when we start looking using actual MongoDB, the API should not change. Right? So anybody who depends on this API doesn't care what the underlying happens, all the details, right? So yeah, so we want some array here of movies, right? We want to say movies, or an array of likes. Sorry, an array of likes, array. I don't want to override this name already. I've already used that name. My likes. Okay, is the array. I want to push the IDMDB. Okay. So we need this array. Let's create that array. Could be here. Could be var. My likes. It's an empty array. Right. It doesn't have anything in it. Okay. Instead of pushing just the string that represents IDMDB, maybe I'd like to push something a little more high level, maybe an actual object, right, that has an attribute. Sorry, oops, has an attribute IDMDB, right, and it passes it. It stores an object whose one of the properties of that object is the IDMDB. What else could I put in here? I could maybe a title. Right, I could put a URL for the thumbnail, right? Maybe I could put the rating. I could put in there as well, right? That could be part of the data model. Let's keep it simple. Let's just keep it the IDMDB, right? What I want. Well, likes, it's like a verb. I want to, this is the movie that I like. I like to be able to retrieve the likes as well, no? All right, so let's get that too. Let's get likes. Get likes. Right? And using our very simple array, right? Our get likes would be what? It's just returns the array, right? My likes. But that's all it does, right? Right, so movie service is likes. I retrieve all the likes. What would I do? Using a RESTful API, what would the URL be if I want to retrieve all the likes? What would the URL be? If I want to create a likes is a post, right? What would the URL look like if I want to retrieve all the likes? It would be a get, right? So it would be exactly the same URL, but it would be a get because we're reading data, we're retrieving data, right? So it would be something like get, the same URL, right? But no arguments, right? Because and the function would be, I'm sorry, I do have to map it to a function, sorry, get likes, right? And get likes takes a response and a request and a response. And it retrieves, it just says what? It passes in the response. Oh wait, it needs the IMDb, right? It needs the IDMDB from the parameter, right? From the path parameter. And then it needs to retrieve no, I'm sorry. This retrieves what? This retrieves. Wait a minute. Wait, what would this look like? Sorry. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah. Actually, does that URL look right? That URL looks funny. What?
Shouldn't have it.
You shouldn't? Well, if I'm sorry?
You're getting all the IMDb's from the server, then you don't need to provide the IMDb.
Yeah, right. It would retrieve all the movies that I like, right? So I don't really need that URL at the end, right? Because I'm just getting all the likes, right? It's not for a particular movie, but I'm retrieving all of them, right? So I don't need this at the end. Very good, thank you. Right, so I don't need this parameter. I don't need the parameter. I'm just going to return all the likes, right? So I'm just going to say response, right? I'm going to send back a JSON object from the model, and it's what is it called? Get likes. Get likes, right? All right, so let's restart the server and let's play around with this. Restart the server. And oops, something went wrong. Let's see. Can I find my movie model? Did I misspell it? Movie model. Oh, I need to go down into the directory models. Right, models. Okay. Very good. Let's refresh that. And if I click on Dumb and Dumber, right? I click on it. Let's see. Okay, it didn't complain. And now say I want to retrieve all the likes. What URL could I use? I could use that URL we just typed there, right? Just this URL right here, right? I can go here, and let's say go here and paste that URL. Localhost 3000, right? API. There it is, right? See that? And the server comes back with all the likes that I have so far. Oops, what happened? Right? So far, I only like Dumb and Dumber, right? And notice that this URL this URL is available to anybody, right? If I post this if I host this on Amazon, AWS, or I host it in OpenShift, right? Anybody who knows this URL can just hit me, right? And the data will be available to anybody in the world who knows this URL, right? So just like, just like my API Films, uses their own, marketing or whatever we could use our own URL, right? For anybody who wants to use our service. Right? These are the movies that they like. Let's try another one. Let's go back here. Let's go to search, right? And search for, let's search for aliens. And I like this movie, so I go to aliens. I click on this. Hopefully, let's see if we refresh this. Oops. Why didn't it work? Something went wrong. Let me see. Inspect. Okay, network. Let's see, aliens. Let's click on it. Oh, it's not posting. Why is it not posting? Why are you not posting? Dumb and Dumber is posting, right? Yeah, Dumb and Dumber is posting. Why are they not? The other one's not posting. Let's see. Let's open up the view. Views, movies, search. Here's a search. ng-click. It's got the same ng-click. It's got the same ng. I'm sorry? Oh, there we go. Model.like. Thank you. There we go. Let's try it again. Right, so let's search for Terminator. Okay, and console, clear that. Actually, no, I want to see a network. So I click on that, Terminator. Okay, the post went out, and I like this one too. And say like Road Warrior, Mad Max. Click on that, and there they are. So Fury Road, I like that one. Beyond Thunderdome. If I go back here and I do a refresh, there they are, right? So these are all the movies, right, that I like. Notice that I'm storing the ID. Another thing that I should probably store is the title and the URL. Let's store that as well, right? Let's do that too. So for instance, in my model like, not only am I going to pass the ID MDB, maybe I'll just pass the entire object. How's that? I'll just pass the entire object, yes? And then in the like function, I could retrieve only the pieces that I want to pass along, right? So in the controller, who's the controller here? That's the that's this one, right? It's this one, the search controller. It's passing. It's this one right here, right? Search movie like. It's passing the ID MDB. I actually want to pass the entire movie, right? And I'm gonna pass it here. And then what else in the movie service? Movie service. It's this one, right? It's this one. No, where's the service? Services. There we go. Movie service. In the post, notice that we're passing that IMDb. See that? What we could do instead, since this is now not just the IMDb, it's an entire movie object, right? What we could do that is post it. Post as an object. There it is, right? And that will be passed in the body, embedded inside of the HTTP body, right? So on the server side, you can come here, and in the likes, not only are we going to have the ID MDB, right? We can retrieve the entire movie object, from the body of the request. Request dot body, right? And we can pass the entire movie object to the likes in the model, right? So the model can receive as an argument in the likes not only the IMDb but the entire movie, and we can store and we can push here not only the IMDb, we can store also the title. Oops, make this a little more readable. We can also pass the title, would be in the movie title. Maybe we want to store what else? The URL for the thumbnail, right? I think it's the URL, poster URL. What, do you remember what the object for that was? I think I rendered it in the details. URL poster, there it is. So we'll call this poster. Store that movie poster, movie URL poster. Right? So let's try it again. Let's restart the server and see if this works or it blows up. Let's stop, restart, and let's go search a couple more things. Notice that because I restarted the server and I hit the service, notice that it's empty, right? It's gone, right? It was in the RAM. It was in the server's RAM. It wasn't stored in any database, right? So it has the lifespan of the server. So let's refresh here, and let's look for Titanic. So I like Titanic 2. Titanic 2. Really? I didn't know that. Ooh, oh wait, we're getting an error. What's going on? Maybe it's not defined. Oops, I broke something. In 15. Blah, 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 blah. Movie. Oh. Yeah, we just passed the movie object, right? Yeah, that was a mistake. So that's easy, right? We can go. Where is that happening? Movie, that service, right? Movie service here. In what line? In 15, right? So fifth right here, right? It's actually, we could do just movie.idmdb, right? Since it's embedded, right? It's embedded. So let's start again. Let's refresh. Pirates of the Caribbean. Let's see. Pirates, the Ice Pirates. Never heard of that one. So click on that. If we hit this service again, there we go. So we are storing, right? The things that we might want to remember about a movie. We could store the entire thing, but it's not. There's no need for it, right? And we can always use the IDMDB to retrieve the data for that particular movie and display in the details. But the poster is there, right? What movie is that? Oh wow, what's that? Hackers. Okay. So there. So I've shown you an example, right, of starting from client, right, going to the outside API, retrieve data, storing on the server, and then navigating to a details page, right? I know I said that the web API is optional in the project, but I strongly suggest that you use those an API. Try to learn that that skill, right? This is one of the few courses where you would have the chance to play around with that kind of technology of retrieving data from RESTful APIs out there. There's so many, right? There are free. I've already pointed some of you to programmable web. This site has tons and tons of free APIs, right? Some of them are XML, some of them are JSON, some are JSON-P. And you know, there's APIs for whatever whatever domain you can think of, there's an API for, right? You know, there's restaurants, there's gaming, there's movies, songs, there's weather, there's whatever you can think of is here. So search here, and only on the server side, right? So you'll need to first go to your server, right, and then go out from Node.js to the server. Go out to their APIs, right? I would stick to the ones that have JSON-P. You can filter. You can say, I only want the ones that support JSON-P. Okay? So you can filter as you like. All right? All right. All right. I think we have, before we jump into, yes? Anybody? Question? No? Before we go on to MongoDB, I'd like to go over the assignments posted over the weekend. It's somewhat long, but it's mostly because it's walking you through certain things that make sure that don't forget this, don't forget that, all right? A lot of it you've done already. Does everybody have access to this URL? I posted it over the weekend. You've worked on the Angular side of this, right? You've worked on the client, you've worked on the controllers, right? On the templates, you've worked on the services. You've kind of mocked up the services, right? You're using arrays. You've hard-coded those arrays on the server, on the client, right? On the browser. What this one asks you is to move a lot of that hard-coded arrays, like we did today, right? Create a service, create a model, a server-side model, right? And move that to the server, right, and create RESTful web APIs to hit your own RESTful services, right? It asks you to start off with the same Angular templates and controllers and services you've been working on for the last couple of weeks. Yes, so keep all that, and the same general requirements apply, right? So it's still going to be a single-page application, right? You're still going to the same AngularJS requirements still hold, right? The routing still holds, yes. The headers and the navigation, that's still there. So everything that was applicable in the previous assignment is still there. Okay, so we're going to keep that. Here it says that now there's a folder requirement structure, a folder structure requirement. This is a structure, the structure that we went over last Thursday. Right, I'm just putting it here as a requirement. You're going to have under /assignment, under there you're going to have two subdirectories, the client and the server, like we did on today's class, right? If you have less and SAS, and some of you do, I've seen that some of you are using this technology. It's not required, but if you do know what it is, go ahead and play around with it. It's pretty cool. It's programmable CSS, which is pretty cool. If you have static CSS, put it under here. If you have dynamic CSS that's generated by less and SAS, the output of your less script or SAS script, your output should go in CSS. Okay? Right? If you have any libraries that you're hosting, put it under JS. If you have any services like we did today and last Thursday, put it under services. So you typically will have at least 3 services, right? You're going to have the user service, the form service, and the field service. Okay. Right. You already have a home view. You have a header view, a footer view. You have a profile view. Right. You have an admin view. All those views still stand. You're going to be adding one more view for this class, for this assignment, the field view. Right. So you're going to keep all the ones that you already have. You're going to add one more, the field view, and one controller for it as well, right? You're going to have a field controller for that. Apps is still just like last assignment. Config is the same. Index is the same. The only thing in index, you're going to have to load that new controller, right? And the new services. So don't forget you need to load those. For the server, So most of your work in this assignment will be on the server side. Most of the work, you're going to create a model for the user. So there will be a user model, and what things can you do with a user? You have to be able to create a user, right? You have to be able to find a user by username and password, right? So all that would go in the user model. For the form, you would also create a form model, right? You have to be able to create forms, delete forms, update forms. So that's the model. And for the service, you're going to have to create URLs that map, right, to all the things that you can do with a form, right? There'll be posts, puts, deletes, right, gets to various URLs. That will tell the model to create, to delete, to update, right? So that's app. App is the top level app, right? The basic is what? It's just receiving the app instance, right? As an argument, instantiates the model, instantiates the services. Right, so we're asking you to one for the form, okay? Which I've demonstrated today how to create a model for the movie, right? And in there you create you'll create an API that allows you to create forms, delete forms, find forms. Yes. These are all the general requirements for all the models, right? They should all live under the models directory. They should be implemented in separate modules. So you have to use module.exports equal function. Yes. These are all legitimate Node.js modules. To accept arguments such as app, okay? We did that today. And then you're gonna have to create, these are the standard APIs, right? You have to be able to create, find all of them, find one, right? Be able to update, delete. Now, each model will have maybe specific requirements, right? For instance, user model, not only are you gonna have the create user, right, delete user, right, definitely those, but I'm asking you to add a couple more, these two, right? You're going to retrieve that user that has that particular username. Or if I pass you credentials, a credential is an object. It's an object that has two fields, a username and password, right? So you have to, again, iterate over the array of users, matching to see who has that user and that password, right? And retrieve that one user that has those two fields. If you think you need more methods, feel free to add them. Any utility methods that you think you might need, add them here as well. I'm asking you to use this mock data, this sample data. We don't have a database yet, right? So you'll need, here's a couple, 5 users, Alice, Bob Hope, Charlie Brown, Dan Craig, and Edward Norton. Okay, so, right, and these are their passwords, username and passwords. And these are their IDs, okay? For the form model, again, implement the same exact CRUD operations, create, delete, update, and so on and so forth, right, that all models should have. But additionally, I'm asking you to create a find form by title, right, or name the name of the title of the form, right? So it'll retrieve that form whose title is the title parameter, okay? And I'm asking you to create the following using this mock data. Okay, so here's a form for capturing contacts information, right? Here's a form for capturing to-do tasks, okay? So in the contact form, there's a whole bunch of fields, right? You have a first name, a last name, an address, state, right? You have a zip and an email, okay? Those are, standard fields in a title, a description, and a due date, right? Notice that each one also has, each field has attributes such as the ID of the field, the label, right? The type, whether it's text, and a placeholder. Placeholder, if you remember, placeholders are an input field, right? You can have a placeholder like it's a grayed out, right? Like a tooltip, give you an example of what you're expecting in that input field, right? Like a tool, like a hint. In this one, this is an options. Options is a drop down. You know, it's a drop down, so you need a lot of options, right? Where you can like a select, right? The label is a human readable label, right? You know, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Whereas values, these are server side values, right? That you know, those are keys for the server. The to-do is a little simpler. You have a text that's a single line, or a text area if you have multi-lines, or a date, right? And they're rendered differently, right? And the UI will render them differently, right? If you remember from the, it's the same wireframe. Oh, I don't have a link for the wireframe. Oh no. Simon's on the front end. It's this one, right? It's the same wireframe. Notice that the drop down renders as a you know, it's something you can select the options. The checkboxes renders checkboxes and radio buttons, and select if it's a date, it renders like a date picker, right? For this assignment, the only one you're gonna be implementing is plus sign, okay, and this drop down, and the delete. Only the delete. Okay? You're not going to implement editing or cloning or dragging around, right? Assignment, right? For now is being added, being able to add, and be able to delete. Right? The next assignment will add cloning and editing. Well, at least editing. Okay, so this is the page that we're implementing for this assignment. Let's see, user model, data model, all the models. Okay, so we have that. Okay, user model requirements. Right, so the form. Okay, so the web services. All right. So all services need to live under services. We know that, all right? We've been doing that from last Thursday. We've been doing this, right? Each service has to be a module, so it has to be inside of a function, right? It needs to take an argument. Right now, the only thing you're going to be accessing is the app and maybe the model, and they have to provide for the equivalent for every function that you have in the model of being able to create, you know, all the CRUD operations that you have in the model. You're going to have a post, a put, a delete, right, and get. Right, there's a mapping here, right? So, for instance, to be able to create, you're going to have a post. And if you're going to be able to retrieve a single one, you'll have an ID at the end. If you're going to be able to modify, you're going to have a put. If you're going to delete, you have a delete. Make sense? Right, that's what we've done for the last week or so. So specifically for the users, you're going to have the following services. Post allows you to create a particular user, and you have to pass an embedded user object. Get user retrieves all the users. If you provide an ID for the user, you'll return that with that one user. If you are retrieving for a particular username, you'll pass it as an argument, username equal username, right? So this over here, that's a parameter name. That's a parameter name. This is the actual value, right? So this is a parameter name. And that's the actual value, right? So for instance, example, this might be Alice. You know, this might be Wonderland. Modify and delete or removes from the array. From the forms web service, you can have something similar. You're going to be able to retrieve all the forms for a particular user ID. So you're gonna have to, for that particular user ID, I want all the forms for that particular user ID. If you gave me an ID of the form, I'll retrieve just that one form. I can delete that particular form, or I can post and create a new form for a particular user, or modify a. Okay. Notice that for the field, we don't have a model for the field. You see that? Did you notice that? We have you have a data model for the user, and we have a data model for the form, but we don't have a data model for the field, right? But we have a service for the field, but not a data model. Where is the data model for the field? Where is it? Notice that it's embedded, right? See that? The data for the field is embedded in the form, okay? If this were in the database course, you would have what? You would have maybe a table of forms, and you would have a table of fields, yes? And if you want to retrieve an aggregate, what would you do? You have foreigns and primary keys referring to each other. You have a fields table referring back to a forms table, saying that these fields belong to that form over there, right? And typically what you would do is that you would join that, right? You would join both tables and retrieve those fields that belong to a particular form, yes? In a NoSQL world, okay, as we're going to start looking this week, we're not going to have joins. We're not going to have joins. And if you have data, right, that exclusively lives as part of another piece of data, right, that data typically is embedded in the parent's data, as opposed to having two different tables, right, and having data live in one table and data live in another table, and you join them, right? In a NoSQL world, what we tend to do is if you have a parent-child relationship, right, the children, right, tend to just its parent, okay, like this, right? Right. So we don't have a separate data model for the fields. The data is just embedded in the parent form. Okay. Now it depends. Whether you can still have, for instance, why are the form data model not living under the user data model, right? Because you can make the same argument, right? You say, well, forms are, live for a particular user. And there's also parent-child relationship there too, right? You say that, this user created these forms. We could have said, added here a comma forms, right? Forms. Can't type today. Right? And this would be an array. And put the data of all the forms under here. Okay? And that's a legitimate argument, right? And that would be totally fine, yes? The question is, would you ever want to look at the forms independently of the user, right? Forms live on their own without the user, right? Say the user leaves, right? And the user doesn't exist anymore, right? They deregister, they left the company, right? Would you still want the form to live beyond the whoever created it, right? And those questions might be, those kinds of questions are the ones you have to ask yourself, right? Does the life cycle of one piece of data depend on the life cycle of another piece of data, right? If you create an order, right, and you say, well, here I am the customer, and I create an order, and then that user never doesn't exist anymore, sense that the order still exists, right? But the order has references to two things, right? It might have a reference to the customer who created the order, and it has a reference to the product of that order, right? If the user doesn't exist anymore, does the order exist anymore? Right? Maybe not, right? But if the order doesn't exist, does the user exist? Well, yes, right? If the order goes away, I still want to keep the user. What about the product, right? If the product is gone, if I don't have the product, does the order make sense? It doesn't make sense, right? If I remove the order, do I also remove the product? Now, and from the database courses, you might have play around with these issues, right? Of having one-to-many relationships and having a parent-child relationship on what happens when you have removing a record. Do you cascade that delete across other ones, right? Some of them might make sense, right? That if you delete one, you want to delete everyone else, right? But some of them do not make sense, right? And those are the kind of questions you have to be able to answer for your particular implementation. I've decided that I want forms to exist outside of the context of the user. Okay, right? Maybe I remember who created it, but once they're gone, I still want the form to stay, even if they're gone. But I've made also the decision that if the form is gone, I don't want the fields. Right? For me, fields have a strong life cycle dependency on the form they belong to. Right? I wouldn't want fields to exist on their own without the existence of the form. Yes? And that's my decision on what I decide the life cycle of these things are. So no, I decided not to put the forms inside of here. Oops. And for your particular application, you'll have to make these decisions yourself, right, on what the data model is. But notice that what happens here is that because the fields are embedded in the form, if I ask for a form object, I will also get the fields. I don't have to ask for the fields independently of the form. Right? When I ask for the form, I already have the field. Okay? As opposed to, if I ask for a user, I don't get the forms for free. So my decision of not embedding the forms inside of the user has given me a challenge, right? That I have to now join these things, right? I have to say, well, here's a user. I know their ID, right? I know their ID, and I have to find the form that user created. Now, in a SQL database, that's easy, right? I just say, give me all the forms, join user with forms where form user ID is equal to user ID, right? And I get all the forms for that user. In a NoSQL world, I don't have that. That's going to go away. Okay? We don't have joins, right? In a NoSQL world, we have to make the joins ourselves. We have to make those joins by scratch, right? We're going to have the ID of the user, and then we're going to go here in the form and say, hey, retrieve for me all the forms created by this particular user. And there might be more than one, right? This one was created by user 00. Oh, no, sorry. This was created by user 123, and this one was created by user 234, right? But there might be more forms created by user 123, right? So I'm going to have to do the join. I'm going to have to go to MongoDB and say, hey, iterate over the collection. Find me all the forms that were created by user. I have MongoDB yet, right? What you're going to have to do in your implementation is you're going to have an array of forms. Yes, you're going to have an array of forms. And when I have a particular user, I'm going to have to, and I ask for the forms for that particular user, I'm going to have to iterate over this array, looking for all the forms of that particular user. Okay? Right? In the next assignment, we're going to have that iteration. We're going to delegate that to MongoDB. MongoDB is going to do that for us. It's going to iterate over the collection, looking for those. All right? So that's why there is no data model. And when I ask for but there is a service. The service still wants to think about being able to retrieve the forms belonging to the fields belonging to a form. So there's a service for that, right? The service here, I'm retrieving all the fields belonging to a particular form. You see that? Right? I give you the ID for the form, and then I'm asking for all the fields in that form. You see that? Or I want to retrieve a particular field for a particular form. Right? Internally, I'm using the form model. Right? So for both web services, the form web service and the field web service, I'm using the same form model, right? Okay. What else here? Here I'm going to delete the field for that form. Here I'm going to create a new field in that form, or I'm going to update the field of that form. Okay, so basically all the URLs, right, map to the particular models. In the client, let's see, what do you need to do in the client? You'll need to, if you remember, the user services that you created for the previous assignment, we're using hard-coded arrays, right? Hard-coded arrays of hard-coded users, hard-coded forms. What you're going to do is you're going to replace that, right, to use the HTTP that goes actually to the server. Now we're going to ask for the server for the data, right, instead of having hard-coded in the client, right? So it says, it's asking you to use HTTP, right, and to use HTTP to the form server, same thing. You already have most of this done. You have to, basically what you need to do is replace returning hard-coded arrays, right, to get it from the server instead. Okay, so you're replacing, it's just one line of code change, right? But nevertheless, I'm just reminding you that you need to do that, right? Replace this. So these are refactoring. So you need to remember. So notice that I am scratching out callback. We're not using callback anymore. See that? We're not using call. We're using $Q this time, right? So no callback. Using $Q. So remember that. So these methods you already have. Client service is brand new. This is brand new. Okay, meaning given the a form ID, I want to add a field to the form. Given a form ID, I want to retrieve all the fields for a particular form. Given the form ID and a field ID, retrieve that particular form ID, or delete a field from a form. You'll need to use the controller. You'll need to remember in the controllers you were using callbacks. Wait, were you using callbacks in the controller? I don't remember. Were you using callbacks? I think you should have been using callbacks, right? Well, what it's asking you to do is that instead of passing the callback, to use the Q API, you know, the .then that we used last week on Thursday. The .then. So basically, what you're going to do is that scratch out callback, right, and replace it with the .then and put the function inside of the then, right? That we did on Thursday last week. Reminding you that you need to do that, right? Okay, the form field. So this is asking you to build this page. This page over here. Okay, to create this page, I would do this last. Right? I would do this last. There's a couple of things that we still need to look at, and we'll look at that on Thursday. Notice that what this is doing is that it's going to iterate over an array of fields. Right? It's going to do an ng repeat. Yes. Field in fields. Yes. And label and then the field. Label, field, label, field, label, field. But look at this. It's not always the same type of field. Right? In the forms, it was easy, right? In the form, when we're doing forms, it was easy. It's just this label, 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 label. You're always rendering the label. So that's trivial. Here in the fields is a little harder, right? Because you're not just, if it was just label, well, that's easy. Just label first name, last name, date, birth. That's easy, just a label. But the actual user interface changes as you iterate. You see that? Well, you have to do, oh, I want an input field now, if the type is text, right? Ooh, I want a text area, if the type is text area. Ooh, I want a checkbox, if the type is checkbox, right? So it's a little more involved. And have we seen ngIf? I forget. Have we seen ngIf? No. Okay. We'll see ngIf on Thursday. And basically, what you do is that in the iterator, as you're iterating, you provide templates for all the various possibilities, right? You provide a template for the input field. You provide a template for the text area, meaning you provided HTML of what you would like it to look at, right? Like if it were an input field, if it were a text area, if it were a checkbox, if it were whatever, right? And then basically you create ngIfs, right? And the ngIf will render only one of them, right, based on the type, right? It will say, oh, if the type is text area, it will render the text area, right? And it will remove all the other from the DOM, right? So it won't litter the DOM. We'll look at this on Thursday. Right, so this one tells you what it is, right? For controller, all right, the routing. Oh, this reminds you that you need to add the routing in config in the config page, right? Config file. Also, the way you get to field, the way you get to this page is by clicking on the form name. You click on it, just like we did today, that you clicked on the movie name and we navigated to the details page. Same thing, right? When you click here, right, you navigate to the fields page. So this is kind of like the details page of the form, right? So in the URL, it will be the ID of the form that I'm looking at, right? You need to grab that ID of the form, like we did today, from the params, route params, right? You're gonna have to go to the server and says, hey server, I have this form ID, give me the fields for this form ID. Right? You're gonna go to the service and it's gonna respond with an array of fields. You're gonna iterate and display the fields. Make sense? All right? Okay, I'm gonna leave it here. On Thursday, we'll look at on things depending on different parameters. Okay. All right. Thank you.